Boulder, Colorado looked like something straight out of a postcard at first glance. Peaceful, clean, a quiet little suburb nestled along the edge of the mountains where you'd hear kids laughing during the day. And by evening, every porch light would flick on one by one, like some invisible clock was guiding the whole town. That's where I had just moved. Daniel Harper, 26, a freelance graphic designer living completely alone. I didn't interact with people much, and to be honest, I preferred the silence. The house was small, 2 bedrooms, but nicely built. The front window looked out onto the main road, but the back had a fenced-in yard. And beyond that fence was where things started to feel off. There weren't any houses past the fence, just a line of thick trees that looked like a black curtain once the sun went down. On the first night, it was drizzling lightly. The scent of rain in the air and the musty smell of old wood in the house gave me this weird nostalgic feeling, like I was visiting my great-grandmother's house as a kid. But everything wasn't quite as peaceful as it seemed. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to a tapping sound on the roof, followed by the soft rustle of leaves in the backyard, like someone was slowly walking, and then suddenly stopped. I got up and walked to the door, but outside it was pitch dark. Just cold air drifting in from beyond the fence, and with it, a strange sensation, like someone was watching me, even though I couldn't see them. I told myself it was just the stress of moving, new place, overactive mind. But something wasn't right. The next day, I met a few neighbors, most kept to themselves. But one older woman stood out, Mrs. Elkins. She looked like she'd lived there forever. When I casually mentioned how I'd been sitting in the backyard drinking a beer at night, she paused and said quietly, "Keep your windows facing the backyard shut at night, dear. That side's not meant for after dark." I laughed it off, figured it was some local superstition, or maybe she was just a little paranoid from living alone too long. But that same night, while I was out back on the lawn chair with a beer in hand and my eyes locked onto my phone screen, I randomly looked up, no reason, just instinct, and I saw it. Or maybe I felt it before I saw it. There was someone standing just beyond the fence, between the trees, shrouded in shadow, but definitely there, watching me. I didn't get a clear view. Maybe it was my imagination. But the feeling, that stare, it went right through me. I stood up, grabbed my flashlight, and walked to the fence. Nothing, just leaves, dirt, and this eerie silence. But as I turned to go back inside, the motion light in the yard clicked on. I froze. There was a flicker of movement in the trees, like someone crouched down quickly and vanished. I stood there for a few seconds, heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. I finally went back in and locked the door, but some kind of fear had followed me inside, a fear that didn't need a reason. It just was, like it had always been there, and I had only just noticed it for the first time. That was the first night. And after that, nothing ever felt normal again. Out of everything, I trusted the small surveillance camera in my house the most. After that first night when I heard something in the backyard, I made up my mind. I'd personally check every bit of footage, no matter what. But the next morning when I sat down to review the recording, something felt off. The video wasn't clear. There were glitches, static lines, and the screen kept distorting at random moments. It didn't feel like a normal technical issue. It was more like something was interfering with the signal, like something was getting in the way. Still, I told myself it was probably the rain or humidity messing with the camera. 2 nights passed without anything unusual, and I started to forget how weird that first night had felt. But the third night changed everything. It was unusually quiet, so quiet that even my own breathing felt too loud. Just as I turned off the lights and tried to sleep, I heard this soft crunch sound coming from the backyard window, like someone was slowly walking over dry leaves and dirt. The sound was faint, but clear enough that I couldn't ignore it. I got out of bed, walked to the window, and gently pulled the curtain aside. It was dark outside, with only a small patch of light near the motion sensor, and there was no one there. I was curious but nervous. Still, I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out into the backyard. The cold air and damp ground added to the stillness. Around me, I walked up to the fence, and that's when I saw it, clear footprints in the dirt. They were coming in from outside the fence, like someone had climbed over and entered the yard. But the trail stopped right in the middle of the backyard. No return steps, no drag marks. Just nothing, like someone had come in but never left. That night, I tried to convince myself it was probably some homeless person wandering near. The fence and I was just overreacting. But things weren't that simple anymore. The next morning, I ordered a high-sensitivity motion sensor and installed it exactly where the footprints had vanished. I felt like I was finally taking control. But what happened next? I couldn't have imagined. That same evening, while returning from the grocery store, I parked in front of the house. As I stepped out of the car, my eyes instinctively shifted toward the woods beyond the fence. And for just a second, I saw him, a tall figure, standing completely still. All black, like a silhouette. His posture was unnaturally rigid, and his face was hidden in shadow. But I could feel he was staring directly at me. My whole body froze. I rushed inside, then straight back out with my flashlight, scanning the entire area behind the fence. Nothing, just broken twigs, scattered. Leaves, no real sign that someone had been there. But my breathing was heavy, and I knew something, or someone, had been standing there. That entire night I couldn't rest. I kept checking the camera feed over and over. Then, around 1:50 a.m., I got a motion alert on my phone. I opened the app and started the feed. The black and white footage was blurry, but in it, I saw something crouched near the fence like it was searching for something, or holding itself up on the ground. But its arms looked too long, like they didn't belong to a normal person. A second later, the shadow moved out of frame, and the feed glitched again. But this time, that shape had burned itself into my mind. I sat there, frozen, staring at the screen. And for the first time, I admitted to myself, this wasn't just some wanderer, it was something else. Whatever it wasn't just watching from beyond the fence anymore. It was trying to come in, and the scariest thought? I wasn't even sure that this thing first appeared beyond the fence, or if it had always been here. And I had just now started to notice it. The line between day and night was starting to blur. I'd sit at my laptop trying to work, but my eyes kept drifting toward the backyard, like something unseen was pulling me, forcing me to glance past the fence. I couldn't focus. That shadow I'd seen a few nights ago near the fence kept replaying in my mind. It wasn't just fear, it felt like pressure, like the weight of something invisible pressing in. But I didn't tell anyone. I was afraid they'd think I was losing it. Still, I found a way to cope. I bought a pair of binoculars and started checking the backyard and the area beyond the fence every so often during the day. It became a strange habit, but it gave me a false sense of control. One afternoon, when the sun was starting to set and the backyard was quiet, I looked through the binoculars and he was there, far away but unmistakable. A tall man completely, covered in dark clothing, standing perfectly still. So still he almost looked like a tree. But then his head tilted slightly in the direction of the fence, and that was it. I froze. He was looking straight at me. My heartbeat went wild. I jumped up and rushed over to my neighbor Mrs. Elkin's house, the same older woman who warned me on my first night. The moment she opened the door, she could read the panic on my face. I didn't waste any time and asked, "Have you ever seen someone beyond the fence?" She paused for a few seconds, then spoke softly, like she was tired. "You're seeing him now. After so many years." Then she closed the door. Her words echoed in my mind like some kind of conspiracy. I had no doubt now. That thing, that shadow wasn't just a person. And maybe it wasn't just watching me anymore. Maybe it was. Triggering memories in people, memories they buried. Out of fear and desperation, I called the local Boulder police. 2 officers came to check the backyard, but by the time they arrived, there was nothing there. Even the footprints I saw earlier had vanished, like the earth had swallowed them. One of the officers said calmly, "In small towns, the mind plays tricks, sir. You probably just need some rest." They took my statement, but their expression said it all. They thought I was unstable. The fear wasn't just outside anymore. It was creeping inside me. That night, I sat near the window with the lights off so I could see outside more clearly. Around 11 p.m., I looked into the backyard and froze. He was standing at the fence, this time much closer. He looked tall, taller than the fence, and his face was hidden in shadows so completely that there were no features at all, just a blank, black shape. I could barely breathe. My hand shook as I reached for my phone, and just as I turned on the camera, the screen glitched with static, like something was interfering with the signal. By the time the feed started recording, the figure had vanished, as if he knew exactly when I'd hit record. I rushed around the house, locking every door and window, trying to build walls around myself. But the fear had already found its way in. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to the faintest sound, something coming from the hallway. Soft, slow footsteps, like someone walking barefoot, carefully, pausing every few steps. I didn't dare turn on the lights. I just sat there, frozen on the bed, feeling a chill spread through my whole body. Even my own breathing felt too loud. Deep down I knew someone else was in the house, someone I had seen outside. But who was now inside? Or maybe had always been inside, and only now decided to let me see it. Everything that had been happening, the shadow, the figure, the static-filled footage, and those faint noises from the hallway, it was all starting to feel way beyond imagination. I had realized that if this wasn't all in my head, then it had to come from somewhere. And if there was a past, then there had to be traces left behind. That anxiety pushed me to start digging through Boulder's public records and old news archives. I didn't find much, but there was one blurry article from 2 years ago. The headline read, "Unattended Death in Northridge Suburbs." It said a young man named Jared Morris, a former tenant of the very house I was living in, had been found dead in the backyard. Official cause, accidental overdose. But something about the article felt incomplete, like the real story was left out on purpose. The only photo of Jared was too blurry to make out his face clearly, but what struck me was his height, his body shape, and most of all, the hoodie he was wearing. It looked exactly like the one I'd seen on the shadow near the fence that night. My hands started to shake. It all felt like pieces of a bigger story falling into place. A story that was waking up again. And this time, I was part of it. I could have walked away, but curiosity had taken over. The next day, I decided to dig in the corner of the backyard where I'd been sensing movement for days. The soil was loose, like something had been disturbed recently. A few inches down, I found a pile of ash, charred wood half burned, papers, and a small old diary buried under it. It was damaged but still readable. The handwriting looked like it had been scratched in a panic, shaky and terrified. The first page said, "He watches me too. He waits when it's dark. Backyard isn't safe." I kept reading that page over and over again, like I could hear that stranger's voice echoing in my ears. I took the diary and went straight to Mrs. Elkins. When she saw it in my hands, her face turned pale. She muttered, "Don't dig, Daniel. Let it stay buried," and then closed the door without another word. Her silence, that fear, settled deep inside me. But by now, it was too late to stop. The next day, I started digging again, deeper this time. I pulled out a rusted pocket knife, some empty pill bottles, and a torn hoodie, the same one I'd seen in the surveillance footage. The moment I touched it, A strange cold ran through my fingers, like the breath of a dead memory still trapped. In the fabric, things were getting out of hand. I couldn't tell if I was hallucinating or if something truly unexplainable was happening around me. That night, I locked myself inside. Every door, every window shut tight, curtains drawn, and a kitchen knife beside me in bed. But around 3 a.m., I woke up to a slow, dry scraping sound, like shhrrrks, hhrrrk. I couldn't figure it out at first, but then I realized it was coming from the window, like someone was dragging their fingers across the glass. Slowly, testing how long it would take to break, I held my breath, completely still. Then, carefully, I peeled back the curtain. No one was there, but fresh finger streaks were smeared across the outside of the window, still wet, like fresh breath. In that moment, it hit me. This thing wasn't just watching from beyond the fence anymore. It wasn't outside the door or near the window. It had already passed through the barrier between me and my fear. And what stood in front of me now wasn't just a piece of the past. It was the face of the end that was still hiding in the shadows. The fear wasn't just in the darkness anymore. It wasn't limited to the rustling windows or the shadows in the backyard. Now it had become a part of me. My breath, my sleep, my waking hours. Every day I felt like someone was around me, watching me from somewhere I couldn't see. Maybe from the corner of the room, maybe from that dark hallway. I finally decided I needed to start recording everything. If people thought I was losing it, fine, but at least I'd have proof. I set up a small indoor camera that covered my living room and hallway. I activated it manually and turned on motion alerts. The first night went by quietly, and I felt a bit of relief. But the second night, around 2:26 a.m., I got a notification on my phone. Living room movement detected. My heart was pounding. I jumped up, turned the lights on, and opened the app. The footage started with static, like the camera had been interfered with. Then the screen froze. When the frame slowly came back, I saw a shadow in the corner of the hallway. A tall, pitch-black figure, standing perfectly still. No face, no features, just a dark silhouette. It didn't move, didn't make a sound, but the silence around it was somehow louder than any scream. My body froze. I couldn't even breathe. I panicked and called the police. When I heard sirens in the distance, I felt a little safer. But when the officers arrived and checked every corner of the house, they found nothing. No signs of a break-in, no marks. Not even a trace of the figure from the video. They told me gently, "Sir, this kind of thing happens. When people live alone, the mind plays tricks. Shadows get misinterpreted." I knew they were just doing their job, but after they left, the loneliness in the room was crushing. That night, I watched the footage again, over and over, pausing, zooming in. And every time, that same shadow stood there in the hallway. Still, and what shook me most, I could faintly see its reflection in the hallway mirror, like it really was there. The next day, I reset the camera, this time with night vision. I was so drained that I passed out into a deep sleep. The next morning, I reviewed the footage. At first, everything looked normal, but after 1 a.m., the audio picked up faint footsteps. Soft but steady, like someone walking barefoot. Then, the camera twitched slightly and started zooming toward the hallway, all by itself. My heart dropped. The camera wasn't supposed to auto-zoom, it had no such function. And then, around 3:11 a.m., a shape slowly emerged in the doorway. It didn't look like a glitch, and it wasn't smoke. It was something forming, like a presence coming into focus. The figure stood there in the doorway, perfectly still, silent, facing directly toward me. I couldn't see its face, but the emptiness. It was colder than death. The camera feed cut out, instantly, like someone had yanked the power cord. I sat in my chair, staring at the blank screen, palms sweaty, eyes frozen with fear. And Then, for the first time, I whispered to myself, voice shaking, "If he was outside before, he's not anymore." In that moment, I realized the fence was never a real boundary. That shadow, that thing, it was inside my house now. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't even limited to the house anymore. Maybe it was already inside me. My entire life had now turned into a kind of surveillance under fear. Every night, the hallway light stayed on, the same hallway where I had seen that figure standing in the doorway just a few nights earlier. All the cameras in the house stayed on constantly, and my attention was always split. One eye on my laptop, the other on the live backyard feed. Sleep had become just an idea, something I remembered from the past, but not something I actually experienced anymore. One night, when the wind was unusually strong and the old walls of the house were creaking, I got a motion alert. But this time, it wasn't just movement, it included audio too. With a mix of curiosity and fear, I grabbed my phone and started the recording. The backyard looked empty, trees swaying wildly, leaves flying around, and the wooden fence creaking slightly. But buried under all that was something else, a faint whisper. Like someone was sitting near the fence, talking to themselves. The voice was low, broken, like lost thoughts being mumbled over and over. For a brief moment, a faint silhouette appeared, behind the trees, almost invisible, then suddenly gone. There was nothing clear, but the way my heart reacted told me something was there. Something that shouldn't be. I isolated the recording and amplified the audio, then put on my headphones and listened closely. Through the static, a few words emerged that sent a cold shock down my spine. "Daniel, watch the trees." I just sat there, unable to take the headphones off. I told myself maybe it was interference from the wind, a trick of audio patterns. But by now, my mind wasn't trying to convince me anymore. It was getting tangled, and fear had taken up permanent residence inside me. I stopped going near the backyard, even during the day. I'd look out the window, but I couldn't bring myself to open the door and step outside. But fear doesn't stay in one place. It always finds new ways in. One afternoon, as the sun started tilting west, I noticed something strange on the ground just beyond the fence, like someone had dug up the dirt. I figured maybe it was an animal, but my curiosity won. I grabbed a flashlight and gloves and went out to inspect the spot. The soil was too loose and damp, like it had just recently been disturbed. A little digging revealed the most disturbing thing I'd found so far: part of a torn photo buried in the dirt, wet and slightly burned. The photo showed part of someone's face, but the other half was completely burned, like with acid or fire. The one remaining eye seemed to hold a silent scream, a desperate warning left unfinished. Up to this point, I had questioned whether this was all in my head, but now it felt like something wanted me to see this, to know something, and maybe even repeat it. That night, as I turned off the lights and laid down, I felt it again, that familiar feeling, like someone was standing just inches away. No sound, no movement, but sometimes presence alone is enough to create fear. I slowly turned toward the window. It was shut, but some faint light was leaking in from behind the curtains. I got up, pulled the curtains slightly, and saw nothing. The backyard was drowned in darkness, same trees, same fence, same silence. But when I pulled the curtain back completely, my eyes caught something in the glass. A handprint, wet, clear, full fingers. A whole palm, like someone had just been standing there, pressing their hand against the glass, looking in. The print was fresh, drops of water were still sliding down. I stepped back, frozen. My heart pounded, and my brain was no longer functioning clearly. One thing was certain now: whatever this was, it wasn't staying beyond the fence anymore. And it wasn't just coming at night. It was always around me now, and maybe this time, it wasn't here to just watch me. Maybe it came to show me something, With each passing night, I was beginning to lose trust in myself. I felt like I was fighting against my own mind. What I was seeing, was it really there, or just something my tired brain was making up? Work had completely stopped. I'd opened my laptop only to end up watching the live feed from the backyard cameras for hours. A strange uneasiness lived in my chest at all times, like something bad was going to happen, but I had no idea when, where, or how. That afternoon, the air completely still and the sky packed with heavy clouds, I found myself standing on Mrs. Elkin's porch. She opened the door, but this time her eyes held a different kind of fear. She refused to let me in. "We'll talk right here on the porch," she said, staying at the doorway herself. When I asked what she remembered about the land behind the fence, her voice dropped to a whisper. She told me that many years ago, maybe over 20 years, there was a man who lived on the other side of that wooded lot. His name was Richard Fields, and he was mentally unstable. He didn't talk to people, he just watched them. He spent most of his days hiding behind trees, and at night, he'd walk along the fence, silently standing outside people's homes. "But is he dead?" I asked. Mrs. Elkin stayed quiet for a moment, then said, "Richard never died. He just was never caught. He comes back sometimes. First, he just watches you. Then he shows up in your dreams." I tried to brush it off as a local ghost story, just another small-town urban myth. But then I remembered the line from the diary, "He watches me too." Everything was starting to connect, like a puzzle putting itself together. I thought about calling the police again, but I knew this time they'd need solid proof, something visual, something that couldn't be dismissed as imagination. That night, I repositioned all my indoor and outdoor cameras, changed the angles, removed a few old ones, and placed new cameras over the usual blind spots, especially the part of the fence where I'd seen movement more than once. I ran a test recording, just to see what the new setup might catch. But what showed up in that footage shook me to my core. At first, everything looked normal, swaying trees, backyard, and shadows. But within minutes, the camera picked up movement, a figure slowly emerging near the fence. And for the first time, the very first time, I saw him clearly. A tall man trying to climb over the fence. His movement was strange, like his body was jerking in pieces. Part of his face caught the light. It wasn't just pale. It was unnaturally white, almost wax-like, without any emotion or expression. It didn't look like a mask, it looked like a dead face still moving. His eyes, or the spaces where eyes should have been, were deep black voids, like if you stared too long, you'd end up seeing yourself. I couldn't pause the video, my fingers were frozen. But the most terrifying moment came when I glanced away from the live feed and caught the reflection on my laptop screen. In the darkened screen, I saw my own silhouette, and behind me, in the hallway, someone was standing. The figure just stood there, staring at me. The second I turned to look behind me, the laptop screen went black. Instantly, completely. Like someone had pulled the power. The room was silent, but I could feel breathing, very close. I knew now, he wasn't beyond the fence anymore. He wasn't just in the backyard. He was in every corner of this house, and maybe he had already found a way inside my mind. By now, my nights had stopped being about sleep. They were filled with constant anxiety. Every 30 minutes, I'd jolt awake, drenched in sweat, feeling like someone was standing in the corner of my room, a tall, still silhouette, completely swallowed by the dark, just standing there, not moving. The moment I'd turn on a light or shift in bed, it would vanish, like it was never there. But the way my heart would pound in my chest was proof enough that something had been. These hallucinations were starting to scare me, and trusting. My own mind was getting harder by the day, but the next morning, I walked into the bathroom and felt the ground slip beneath me. On the fogged-up mirror, something had been written, messy smears like someone had dragged their fingers through the condensation. I leaned in closer. It said, Don't turn around." I stood there for a few seconds, staring at the mirror. And then I felt a soft breeze brush against the back of my neck. I panicked, bolted out of the bathroom, and noticed the front door of my house was wide open. I always double-locked it. Out on the porch, there were marks in the dust, and moisture on the railing, 2 prints, like someone had been sitting there for a while. Heavy, like they didn't belong to someone small. That same moment, I called my friend Matt. It was the first time I told anyone I was actually scared. He said he'd come to Boulder that weekend, but even over the phone, I could tell from his voice. He was shaken too. The next day, without even realizing how, I found myself climbing over the backyard fence, the one that had marked the edge of my fear for so long. For the first time, I stepped into the woods beyond. With every step, the air got heavier, almost like the trees were pulling me in. Deeper in, I started seeing things that didn't feel right. Scorched photographs on the ground, old children's toys covered in moss, and a hole. Deep and wide, just about the size of a human body. The dirt around it looked recently disturbed, like someone had just buried something there, or dug something out. I ran. My breathing was erratic, and behind me, I kept hearing the soft crunch of footsteps. I turned around, nothing but swaying trees and rustling leaves. When I got back home, I found that my indoor surveillance system had shut off. The screen read, "Manual access granted." But I had never logged in. It was like someone else had entered the system and deleted the recordings themselves. That night, I left all the lights on and tried to sleep. But every time I closed my eyes, fear forced them back open. The slightest sound would have me sitting upright, listening in the silence. Eventually, exhaustion overtook fear. I drifted off. The next morning, the first thing I saw nearly stopped my heart. Right next to my bed, on the floor, were dirty footprints, barefoot, as if someone, or something, had been sitting there the entire night, watching me sleep. And the way the prints were laid out, it was clear. Whatever it was, it hadn't moved. It had just watched quietly. Just like that thing used to stand in the hallway. The fence, the shadows, the backyard, all of that now felt like part of the past. The fear wasn't outside anymore. It was inside the house, and maybe it wasn't planning on leaving. When Matt arrived in Boulder, his face said it all. For a few seconds, he clearly thought I was exaggerating. He had the expression of someone visiting a stressed-out friend. He asked, "You good, man? Isn't this getting a little too much?" I showed him everything. The photos of the muddy footprints, the audio clips, the deleted footage log that said "Manual access granted." Everything that had, until now, only been inside my head. At first, Matt tried to chalk it all up to an overactive imagination. But as he walked through the hallway and stood near the backyard, something shifted in him. The strange cold air, the eerie silence. The way the walls seemed to hum, his face turned serious. I told him I didn't think the thing I'd been seeing was a regular person. I thought it was someone lost. Someone who had been forgotten, but who never actually left. That night, the two of us started digging through the Boulder Police Department's public records, looking through local missing persons files. After scrolling for a while, we found a case that shook both of us. The name was Richard Fields. It was from almost 18 years ago. The file said he had once attempted suicide, but later went missing, and his body was never recovered. At the bottom of the file was a blurry photo, and it was him. The same face I'd seen near the backyard fence. Same long features, the hollow, deep-set eyes, and that weird, blank expression, like not a man, but a version of someone who had lost everything. I looked at Matt, and for the first time, he looked into my eyes and said, "Bro, maybe he never died, maybe he never left." We reset all the indoor and outdoor cameras in the house. Every corner, hallway, backyard, bedroom, kitchen, was now under 24/7 surveillance. We stayed up the whole night watching the camera feeds. At exactly 2:43 a.m., We saw something on the hallway camera that made our skin crawl, a blurry figure, human-shaped, crawling across the hallway floor. No sound, like it was gliding through the air. Its movement wasn't normal. Its joints looked like they were breaking. The body twisted and jerked in ways no living person's body should move. The face wasn't fully visible, but the neck was bent at a disturbing angle, almost backwards. Matt grabbed my hand and said, "Lock the room, right now." We ran into the bedroom, slammed the door, and locked it from the inside. The house went completely silent. The kind of silence where even your own breathing sounds too loud. And then, there was knocking, soft but very clear. Knock, 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 3 times, then a long pause, then again, knock, knock. The rhythm was mechanical, like it was mimicking something, like whatever was outside wasn't human, but something trying to act human. Matt and I stared at each other, frozen in fear. I grabbed my laptop with shaking hands and turned on the live camera feed. But the screen started glitching. Pixels floated, the image flickered, and then the screen filled with total distortion. And then, with no sound, a message flickered across the screen. "He knows you're watching." The message blinked on and off for a few seconds, like someone was staring back through the camera, and they knew we were watching. Matt was just as terrified as I was now. We both realized this wasn't just a lost man. It wasn't just some drifter. This was something unfinished. An unfinished story that never ended, and now it wanted to make us part of it. There was a strange stillness in the morning air, like something had happened during the night that carried over into the day. Matt and I had already made plans to leave the house, to get out of Boulder for a few days and clear our heads. But the moment we opened the front door, we saw something on the porch that made our bodies freeze. Hanging on the railing was an old, torn hoodie, the same one I'd found buried during the backyard dig. Its sleeves were covered in dirt, and it had this sharp, rotting smell, like something damp that had been left to decay. But the most disturbing part? We never brought that hoodie to the porch, and no one could have gotten that close without triggering the cameras. We realized we couldn't figure this out alone anymore. So, I reached out to Dr. Carol Ingram, a local therapist and paranormal researcher who had studied unexplained activity cases in Boulder. She already knew a bit about Richard Fields. When I told her everything, the fence, the shadows, the hoodie, the diary, and the buried objects, she looked at me and said something I didn't expect. "Richard isn't human anymore. He's become a silent stalker archetype, a psychological entity that feeds off the energy you give it. The more you observe him, the more shape he takes, and the closer he gets." As soon as she said that, everything from the past few weeks started to make a different kind of sense. Every clip, every shadow, every noise. They weren't just random. I realized the real source of fear wasn't in the backyard. It was me. My own focus, my obsession. That had become the thing fueling this. Matt told me we should leave the house, maybe even leave Boulder altogether. But with a strange calmness, I said, "If I leave, he'll come with me." Even I didn't recognize my own voice when I said that. It didn't sound like the person who moved into this house 2 months ago. Dr. Ingram suggested we do one final night of surveillance, using special thermal and night vision cameras that could pick up on anything not visible to the naked eye. That night, we set up the equipment and sat in the living room, watching the live feeds. For the first few hours, everything stayed quiet. But around 3:12 a.m., the thermal camera picked up a human-shaped figure slowly approaching from the backyard fence. Its body temperature was far below normal, so low, the air around it looked colder too. But here's the strange part. When we checked that same spot using the regular camera, the backyard looked completely empty. Just an old swing swaying in the breeze. The ropes creaking with a sound that, in the silence of night, felt almost like a scream. Then suddenly, the thermal feed froze. Pixels began to distort, static filled the screen. And then a message flickered across the middle, as if someone was using the thermal frequency to speak directly to the system. It said, "I'm not in the backyard anymore." Matt turned to me, his eyes wide with fear. And I just sat there, staring at the screen. I understood now, this thing wasn't tied to a place anymore. It wasn't in the backyard, it wasn't outside, it was inside. Inside the house, inside my thoughts. Inside every memory I had. The backyard wasn't just a physical space now, it had become a door. One that, once opened, wouldn't close again. Nothing was the same after that night. And we both understood, this story was never just about the man in the backyard. It was about the thing that settles inside us as fear, and never leaves. The thermal footage from that night was no longer just surveillance, it felt like a warning. The next morning, Matt, Dr. Carol Ingram, and I sat huddled around the screen, analyzing it frame by frame. Every pixel now felt like it was part of a paranormal record. That blurry figure we saw was clearly crossing the backyard fence and slowly heading toward the house. Its movements were unnatural, almost like gravity was dragging it, or it was some exhausted soul trying to walk. But the most disturbing part? As it moved toward the bedroom, the heat signature on the thermal cam kept dropping lower than human body temperature, below freezing. And then it became so cold that the rest of the frame started to distort. Dr. Ingram's face turned pale. She whispered, "It's not just outside anymore. It's attached to you." At this point, things weren't just creepy, they felt real, too real. That afternoon, I made a decision. If I wanted to break free from this thing, I had to go back to where it all started beyond the fence. Matt tried to stop me, said I shouldn't go alone. But deep down, I knew this path was mine to walk. I stepped into the backyard, crossed the fence, and made my way into the dense woods. With every step, the air felt heavier, like something in the trees was trying to push me back. After nearly half an hour, I saw an old burned-out wooden shed. I was sure it hadn't been there before, or maybe I just never noticed it. It leaned to one side, its wood scorched black, but the door was still intact. I pushed it open and stepped inside. It felt like something straight out of a horror movie, walls covered in strange charcoal drawings. One showed a man with blood pouring from his eyes. Another showed a shadowy figure standing behind someone. And scrawled at the bottom, in messy writing, "You brought him back." My entire body froze. Then I heard a slow, shallow breathing sound, right behind me. Before I could turn, the shed door slammed shut behind me with a deafening bang. Everything went still. All I could hear was my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I yanked the door open with all my strength and stumbled out. But outside, everything had changed. The sky was dark gray now. The sun was gone. And most terrifying of all, I couldn't remember the way back. I kept walking in circles, ending up at the same place again and again. It felt like the woods wanted to keep me. Finally, after what felt like hours, I saw the fence. As I moved toward it, I started hearing footsteps behind me. One step for every one of mine. I turned around, nothing. Just cold, dense air. When I finally made it back and opened the door, Matt looked at me and said, "Dude, you never left. The house, you were here all day. I saw you twice." I froze. I remembered those woods, the shed, the drawings, that door slamming shut. Then Matt grabbed my laptop and pulled up the indoor camera feed. What we saw made my skin crawl. There was the same shed on the live feed, and someone was standing inside it, completely still. Its eyes were staring straight into the camera lens. Before the screen turned to static, one last frame flickered, and I caught a glimpse of the figure's face. It looked exactly like mine, like a version of me that never left that shed. Or worse, one that had followed me back. What Dr. Ingram was saying no longer felt like just a paranormal theory. It had turned into a brutal reality. She told me this entity wasn't just a presence anymore. It had started to blend into the boundaries of our world. Static frequencies. Sound, those are its new forms, she said. The moment you began to notice it, it planted itself inside your perceptual space. It doesn't live in places now. It lives in signals. And slowly, that started to feel true. My electronics at home began turning on and off by themselves. My phone would randomly vibrate without any notification. And sometimes faint whispers would come through the speaker. A soft voice saying, "Don't ignore me." I kept putting on my headphones, trying to convince myself it was background noise, but deep down I knew. This thing had moved beyond just sound. One night as I was about to fall asleep, I heard a soft, eerie laugh coming from inside my room, so faint I thought I might be hallucinating. I quickly hit record on my phone, and the next morning when I played it back, I heard myself muttering in my sleep, "He lives inside the quiet." It was my voice. But it didn't sound like me. It had a different tone, like I was repeating something I hadn't said on my own. I loaded the audio into editing software, trying to isolate the strange noise. I couldn't break it down completely, but when I boosted the lower frequencies, I started hearing faint repeated words. "Look behind you, look behind you," again and again. My spine tingled. I turned to look behind me. Nothing was there. But even the emptiness started to feel threatening. Matt had witnessed all of this, and he finally admitted that either something truly paranormal was happening, or my mind was unraveling. Eventually, he decided to leave the house. He packed up his bags and simply said, "Dan, I'm sorry, but this is way beyond me now." After he left, the house got even quieter, but not in a peaceful way. It was the kind of silence that felt like it was breathing, like someone was still in the room with me. One day, I stood in the bathroom, staring at myself in the mirror, trying to figure out if I was still the same person. But my reflection had changed. My eyes, which were normal in real life, had turned pitch black in the glass, completely black, no pupils, no emotion. But as soon as I blinked, they went back to normal. I quickly turned around. Nothing. But the mirror didn't feel like just a reflection anymore. It felt like a window into something else. Later that same day, I got a voicemail. The caller ID was unknown. The message was nothing but static, and then a slow, low voice said, "I'm almost through." That was it. Then the beep. Like something was building a path from another side. That night, my sleep tracking app recorded something new. It caught the sound of breathing, very close to the mic. But the scariest part was that it didn't match my own breathing. I compared it using headphones. Mine was quick and panicked. But the other one was steady, slow, and cold. Like someone was sitting right next to me, just watching. This thing wasn't tied to a place anymore. Now it had entered my senses. And it wasn't leaving. I wasn't alone in the house anymore, and now I could feel it even during the day. Every corner, every shadow, every open window felt like it was watching me. No matter where I went, it felt like someone was standing right behind me, just far enough to stay out of sight. One day, while digging through an old cardboard box of photo albums, I came across a picture from my childhood. I must have been around 5 or 6, and it was taken in our backyard. But what shook me to my core was what was in the background, a shadowy figure standing near the fence. The shape was human-like, but the face was blurry and completely out of focus, almost like it had been deliberately hidden. I had never seen that photo before, and I needed to know if it was real, or if my mind was just messing with me. I immediately called my mom. At first she talked casually, but when I mentioned the photo, her tone changed. She said softly, "You used to talk about a man all the time when you were little. You'd say he stood by the backyard fence and watched you. I thought he was just your imaginary friend." I couldn't breathe for a second. If this was something new, I might have believed it was tied to the Boulder house, but now it was clear. This thing had been connected to me for years. Boulder was just a trigger, a door that was always meant to open. I was now certain that this wasn't just a wandering spirit. It was a thought, a pattern, a parasite that had lived with me for most of my life. And now it was fully here. That day, I opened my laptop, and without typing anything, the browser opened on its own and loaded a random blog. The Man in the Backyard, witness accounts. There were short entries from people I didn't know. Different cities, different timelines, but all describing the same thing. A shadowy figure watching them from beyond the fence. And in every entry, there was one sentence written in bold. The last time I saw him, he was inside. My stomach dropped. It felt like that sentence was written just for me. Right then, my laptop's webcam light turned on, without my permission. I tried shutting it off, but the settings were frozen. Slowly, static began to build on the screen. And through it, a blurry figure started to emerge, looking straight at me. In that moment, I understood. The observing phase was over. It wasn't just watching anymore. Now it wanted to be seen. It wanted to feed off my fear. I checked the security footage. What I saw completely broke me. There I was, sleepwalking in the middle of the night. My face was blank, eyes half open, as I walked slowly toward the fence. But the truly terrifying part wasn't that I was sleepwalking. It was what was behind me. There was a tall figure following me, the same one from that old childhood photo. Just standing there, watching, like it had done this for years. I don't trust myself anymore. I don't know when I'm still me. And when I've become him. It was decided now, I was going to leave Boulder. I had started packing my things, but every night, as soon as the sun went down, the corners of my room would start to darken in a strange way. It wasn't normal darkness. It felt like the shadows had weight, like they were moving, breathing, getting closer. From every corner, from every crack in the walls, it felt like something was watching me. It didn't need to hide anymore. The power in the house kept flickering. And every time the lights went out, the presence would feel closer. Sometimes I could actually feel breath on the back of my neck. So close I could feel the damp air on my skin. I tried to leave. I started the car, but the GPS kept rerouting to that same burnt-down shed, over and over again. I called Dr. Ingram, my hands shaking, but the call cut out halfway, and through the static I heard that same whisper again. "You're too late." I knew I needed help from someone more intuitive. So I reached out to a psychic named Elena Carter, someone I knew who'd once helped the Boulder police on a cold case. She listened to everything, and after a pause, she said just one sentence. "He's not behind you anymore, Daniel. He's inside you now." I swear, it felt like ice rushed through my veins. That night I stood in front of the mirror, and for a few seconds, my reflection moved differently than me. I was looking straight ahead, but in the mirror, my facial bones shifted. My eyes had an unnatural intensity, and the person looking back wasn't me. I shut my eyes tightly and tried to calm myself down. The next morning, I forced myself to take a walk in a nearby park, hoping the fresh air might help break this feeling. But as soon as I got there, a few strangers started staring at me. One older woman came right up to me and said, "Are you okay? You don't look like yourself." That sentence hit me like a hammer. You don't look like yourself. Was it visible now? Could people actually see what I was starting to feel on the inside? That I wasn't me anymore? That something else was living in my skin? Later that night, I checked the updated footage from my home CCTV system. On the screen, I saw myself walking down the hallway, but the way I moved, it was off. My body was stiff, my head tilted slightly, and the most disturbing part, I wasn't blinking. It was me, but the way I moved didn't feel human. It was like someone was acting through me, like I'd become a puppet. I was watching myself, on the screen, but whatever that Daniel was, it wasn't me. Daniel had moved nearly 100 miles away from Boulder to an isolated cabin deep in the mountains, hoping to finally escape this entity. There were no neighbors, no cell signal, just the cold wind, whispering trees, and the old creaking wood of the cabin that seemed to speak every night. He was hoping this would end it. But fear doesn't run, it follows. Inside the cabin, he found an old dusty diary left behind by a previous tenant. On the first page, it read, "His name is Redden, and once you name him, he listens harder." Daniel froze. This was the same entity he had always referred to as the shadow. Him, or the man in the backyard. Now it had a name. As he read further, the diary spoke of nightmares, of eyes that erase your reflection, of a presence that enters your dreams. But the final line of the diary was the worst. "I whispered his name once, and he stood behind me the same second." The cabin walls were scratched deeply, as if someone had clawed at them from the inside. Outside, strange white symbols were carved around the windows, like part of some ancient protective spell. But one symbol had faded, the boundary was broken. That night, Daniel had a lucid dream. He saw himself in the same burnt shed, facing the tall figure. This time it had no face, but the eyes looked like his own, hollow, black, burned. In the dream, Redden whispered, "Your name is in me now. You've recognized me, and now I'll live through you." Daniel woke up screaming, but it was already too late. Symbols were carved into his palms, like someone had scratched them while he slept. They didn't hurt. When he checked the cabin's camera feed from 3:33 a.m., he saw himself standing at the window, whispering, like calling something. Nothing appeared behind him, but the audio picked up Redden's whisper, "Closer now." The last frame froze as Daniel's eyes slowly turned black and he softly said, "I tried to run, but now I dream in his voice." Daniel was no longer in the cabin, or maybe he was, in a different form, breathing through Redden's voice. The fear wasn't just in the dark anymore. It was in the daylight too, in every corner. The walls seemed to breathe. The windows showed his own eyes, staring back at him. The wind chimes outside rang constantly, even without wind. He smashed them, but the sound echoed inside him for hours. At the end of the diary, a single line was written in faded ink. "When you dream in his voice, your breath is no longer yours." That alone was terrifying, but the real fear began when Daniel's own voice started sounding unfamiliar. His speech, tone, and rhythm weren't his. It was like someone else was speaking through him. Then one night, the same knock. 3 times pause, then 2 more. The same pattern he first heard back in Boulder. He opened the door, no one was there. Just a dead dove on the ground. And the same carved symbols over its eyes that had once appeared on Daniel's palms. This wasn't imagination. It wasn't hallucination. It was in the real world now. That dove was part of something, a ritual. Redden was taking over. That night, Daniel looked in the mirror, and his eyes had changed. Hollow dark, unrecognizable. He started to remember who he was, but his thoughts weren't his anymore. His dreams only had one voice now, and it spoke even when he was awake. He whispered to himself, "I'm still Daniel." But from deep within his own mind, a reply came, "No, you're Redden now." And that's when he finally realized the man he had been running from, he was becoming. His memories were fading, his shadow no longer moved with him. And the transformation had only just begun. Daniel had completely changed now. His face might have looked the same on the outside, but inside, there were 2 voices living within him. One was his own, trying to hold on, and the other, quieter but persistent, whispering doubts and slowly taking over. Every time he tried to make a decision, that voice would murmur, "Are you sure that's what you really want?" He had started watching the cabin surveillance footage at night, and seeing himself muttering in his sleep took him to a whole new level of fear. The scariest part was that his eyes were wide open, but there were no pupils. Just empty. White orbs, like his soul had left his body. And the words he mumbled were in a language he had never learned or even heard, guttural, ancient, with a strange hypnotic rhythm, as if reciting some old curse. He now understood. Redden wasn't just a shadow. It was an infection. And if Boulder was where it started, maybe that's where it could end too. So he decided to go back. On the way, his breathing grew uneven, and the car radio kept picking up weird static, like even the airwaves were disturbed. He tried calling Matt. 3 times the call dropped. The 4th time, it connected, but no one spoke. Just the sound of deep breathing. Then a whisper, "You left the door open." A chill ran down his spine. When Daniel reached Boulder, everything felt off. His old house looked abandoned, like it had been empty for years, even though he had left just weeks ago. The grass was overgrown, newspapers stuck out of the mailbox, and the windows were coated in dust. He looked toward Mrs. Elkin's house. The door was shut, and an old, faded police notice hung outside. Unattended death, January 2022. He froze. This had just happened recently. So why did the date feel like it was from years ago? Had he come back too late? With shaky hands, he opened the door to his old house. The air inside was cold, heavy, and hard to breathe. Everything was exactly as he had left it, only now it was covered in thick dust, and the walls had small scratch marks. Like something had been waiting there, hiding, holding its breath. He made his way to the bedroom, the place where it had all started. As soon as he stepped into the doorway, his heart pounded, like something was aware of him again. There was a mirror ahead, foggy, slightly cracked. He made the mistake of looking into it, and behind him stood a figure. Tall, face shadowed, eyes empty. Daniel spun around. No one was there. But when he looked back into the mirror, it was still standing there, staring at him. This time, its lips were moving, whispering something, though no sound came from the glass. Maybe it was that second voice, no longer just inside him, but now standing right in front of him, and this time, it wasn't going away. Daniel was now sure that his sense of self was slipping away, and something else, someone else, was taking his place. For one last time, trying to hold on to what was left of himself, he set up surveillance cameras all over the house, every room, every hallway, every corner where shadows had once moved. This time, the goal wasn't to escape. The fear it was to capture it, so that if he lost, there'd be proof. He tied himself to the bed using zip ties, hoping that if he sleepwalked again, he wouldn't be able to get far. He monitored the camera feeds live on his laptop, his eyes tired, but his mind alert. Every beep, every flicker of a pixel had his full attention. Then, at 2:47 a.m., the backyard camera picked up movement. A blurry figure slowly moved near the fence. Its motion was strange, glitchy, like a frame skipping on an old VHS tape. The figure would freeze, then suddenly jump forward a few steps, then freeze again. Its face was turned away from the camera. But the moment it turned to look into the lens, the screen distorted static lines, crackling audio, and then a chilling silence. Then came 3:33 a.m., the same time that had repeated throughout this entire experience. The indoor feed suddenly froze, and when it came back, Daniel was no longer tied to the bed. He was seen walking quietly out of the room, his steps calm but lifeless, like a puppet being moved by someone else. His eyes completely white, emotionless, and his expression was empty, like no one was home inside. The hallway camera tracked his back as he moved forward without ever turning, like he was following a voice no one else could hear. On the kitchen camera, he slowly opened the fridge and pulled out a torn hoodie, the same one they had found buried in the backyard, the one connected to Redden, the one that had once been hanging on the fence. Daniel held it, smelled it, then slowly put it on. At that moment, the audio feed started to distort again, like another frequency had broken in. The screen turned to static for 15 seconds. When the image returned, Daniel was standing in front of the mirror. But the reflection in the mirror wasn't Daniel. It was Redden, same height, same build, but with a waxy face, hollow eyes with no pupils, and a faint smile on his lips. A smile of victory. Daniel's body was staring directly into the mirror, but when he tilted his head down, the reflection didn't move. Redden kept staring straight ahead, right at the camera. Then the feed went black. In the final second, one word appeared on the screen: simple, clean and cold, replaced. Daniel was gone. Or maybe he just wasn't himself anymore. And whatever was in that house, it wasn't trapped behind the backyard fence anymore. It was in every screen, every sound, every reflection, quietly watching, waiting for the next door to open. The next morning, the Boulder Police Department received a strange anonymous call. There was no clear voice, just static like a broken radio signal, and then a slow, very faint whisper. "There's someone else inside me now." The call couldn't be traced. Still, 2 officers were dispatched to Daniel Harper's home. The front door was halfway open, no signs of forced entry. No damage, but the silence inside was different. The house felt empty, with a strange cold draft flowing through every room. There was no trace of Daniel, no clothes, no bags, no footprints. Just an open diary sitting on the dining table. On its last pages, in shaky black ink, a single line was written. "I don't know who is writing this. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's him. Or maybe we're the same now." One officer picked up the diary, but then noticed strange symbols drawn on the wall, spiraling, eye-shaped, hypnotic lines, like they were quietly watching. They didn't look freshly painted. More like they had always been there, just unnoticed. The home surveillance system was still running, but every file was corrupted black screens, high-pitched static. Only one clip could be recovered, where a voice, sounding like Daniel, said, "I'm the backyard now." The police tried to piece it together. Was this a mental breakdown, a stalking case, something else? But no theory held. Within that same week, 3 more Boulder residents reported seeing a tall man standing beyond their backyard fences at night. His eyes were never clear. His face was always blurry, like cameras couldn't quite catch him. One teenager set up a camera in his backyard at night, and in the footage, a figure could be seen slowly climbing over the fence. As soon as it did, the camera began to shake out of focus. The figure looked directly into the lens and whispered, "Tell Daniel, he's not coming back." That teenager still lives in Boulder, but he's boarded up the window facing the backyard and painted in bold letters across his wall, "Do not look outside after midnight." The case file was closed. A few weeks later, no body was found, no witnesses, no suspects. The final line, handwritten by the investigating officer, simply read, "Unsolved." But somehow still ongoing. The story doesn't end there. Redden isn't just Daniel's story anymore. He's near every fence where someone sits alone late at night, staring into their backyard. And they feel like someone's watching. Maybe now they really are. And maybe next time, he won't just watch, he'll replace. A few weeks later, a post went viral on Reddit titled, "The Man in the Backyard." A user had uploaded surveillance footage from their backyard, showing a tall, blurry figure standing by the fence, almost exactly like the one from Daniel's story. The video was grainy, but the figure's height, its slouched posture, and its unblinking stare were disturbingly familiar. Hundreds of comments started flooding in. People from New Jersey, Oregon, Florida, Texas, different states, different dates, but all sharing the same experience. There was a man standing by the fence at night, silent, just watching. Some posted blurry photos, others uploaded motion alert screenshots, even sleepwalking footage. But the one constant? His presence just beyond the fence. 2 days later, a new comment appeared at the bottom of the post. The username was Active3, it said. he's not stuck in Boulder. He's in all backyards now, especially the quiet ones. Right after that, the thread was locked. Mods blamed it on a technical glitch, but somehow, that post kept showing up in people's recommended feeds for hours. That night, the Reddit user behind Red_ACTIV3 was sitting alone in front of his laptop. As he leaned in to turn off his webcam, the screen flickered, and for a second, he saw a face in the monitor. But it wasn't his. It was looking from the inside out, its eyes completely black, staring through the screen like it could see his soul. That's when the narrator's voice comes in calm, cold, and heavy. If you've heard this story, maybe he's watching you now too. Because he only watches those who first saw him. The screen slowly zooms out to show an empty backyard, a long stretch of wooden fence, and a quiet tree gently swaying in the breeze. Everything feels still. Then suddenly a tall figure slowly rises from behind the fence. It turns and looks directly into the camera. Its eyes don't move, but there's something in them that chills you, even through the static. The screen cuts to black. Silence. Just silence. Then a soft whisper fades in. Do not watch this again. And finally, just a pitch black screen. Nothing else. No movement. No text. Until 12 seconds later, a sharp flicker of static. A single blinking word flashes on screen. He's not gone. He never leaves. Then silence again. Heavy. Like something on the other side has finally noticed you. The story doesn't have an ending. Because like Daniel, you've been seen now. And now, he waits. Just for a quiet night. An empty backyard. And one moment of eye contact. I don't know where Daniel is now. Or if he's even human anymore. That last surveillance clip his static face, the hoodie, the silence, it all felt like someone had slowly taken his place. Quietly, like a breath slipping in. The house in Boulder is locked up, but they say there's still something just beyond the fence, something that's no longer tied to one place, but is everywhere now. Redden isn't bound to a location. He's drawn to anyone who learns about him or hears his story. Many have claimed they've seen him too, at the edge of their backyard, in the shadows or late at night when their motion sensor lights flicker on for no reason. Some say they saw him in the reflection of a window, someone standing right behind them, but when they turned around, there was no one there. Just the faint dampness of a breath, lingering like a sign that someone was there. Don't think this ended with Daniel. It didn't. His final words were, "I dream," in his voice now. And since then, others have reported hearing the same voice through static on a radio, or whispering to themselves while standing near a mirror. If you ever find yourself alone in your backyard at night, and suddenly feel like someone is watching you, don't look back, because if you lock eyes with him even once, you're now part of his sightline. From that moment on, he'll be there, in those quiet moments, when you're showering and glance at the foggy bathroom mirror, when you're about to sleep and something shifts in the hallway's dark gap, or when your phone fills with static and a voice says, "Don't ignore me." Daniel's story didn't end. And maybe yours is just beginning. So next time you're out in your yard and the wind suddenly picks up, or a tree's shadow looks a little too much like a man, just whisper to yourself, "I didn't see him, I didn't see him." Because the moment you believe you did, he sees you, and once he does, he never leaves. This was today's story, The Man in the Backyard. A chilling tale that doesn't just scare you, it stays with you. Daniel's story isn't over, because fear grows in the places we feel the most alone. If you enjoy creepy, unsettling, and psychological horror stories like this, make sure to subscribe to Chilling Talks. Every week we bring you true scary experiences, stories that don't just spook you, but echo in your mind long after they're over. Like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to hit the bell icon, so next time fear knocks, you're ready. Chilling Talks, where fear isn't just a story, it's a feeling.